Special edition of PFTPM for one purpose and one purpose only, to break down and identify the issues moving forward in the lawsuit that was filed Friday night against Commanders kicker Brandon McManus. It dates back to the 2023 season when he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And as alleged in the lawsuit filed in the Duval County Circuit Court on Friday night, McManus is accused by two flight attendants of rubbing himself against them and grinding against them. The Jaguars are also sued for allegedly failing to supervise McManus and failing to create a safe environment for the staff that was serving the team on the flight from Jacksonville to London in advance of the games the Jaguars played there last year. Now, let's get up to speed on where everyone stands on this, because obviously the civil lawsuit is the allegations made by the plaintiffs. And in this case, remember, there are two. They work for Atlas. This is a company that has relationships with many different teams, providing the services, the charter, and the assistance during the flight for the teams as they migrate from one city to the next, or as the case may be, from one continent to the next. So the two flight attendants have made their allegations. We'll circle back to what that means and what that could lead to. The NFL, I asked them for comment yesterday, late afternoon, early evening. They said they're aware of the situation. They declined to comment. The Commanders, the team that signed Brandon McManus after the 2023 season to be their kicker on a one-year deal. This is the statement that was issued by the Commanders to the Washington Post earlier today. We were made aware of the civil lawsuit filed on May 24 against Brandon McManus. We take the allegations of this nature very seriously and are looking into the matter. We have been in communication with the league office and Brandon's representation and will reserve further comment at this time. The Jaguars, the team that McManus was playing for and the team that has been sued for failing to supervise McManus and provide a safe environment on the flight from Jacksonville to London, initially declined comment. Then last night via ESPN.com said, "We're aware of the complaint and we acknowledge the significance of the claims as we continue to look into the matter. It bears emphasizing that we as an organization built by people," or let me try that again. "We insist on an organization built by people who represent our community and game with the highest character and class." And some would say, you just had a guy steal $22 million right out from under your nose, and Urban Meyer was your head coach a few years ago, but okay, we insist on an organization built by people who represent our community and game with the highest character and class. Regardless, that's what the Jaguars had to say. Most importantly, McManus issuing on Monday night through his lawyer, hired to represent him in this civil case filed in Jacksonville, said this: "To be clear, these are absolutely fictitious and demonstrably false allegations made as part of a campaign to defame and disparage a talented and well-respected NFL player. We intend to aggressively defend Brandon's rights and integrity and clear his name by showing what these claims truly are: an extortion attempt." That is a strong, strong statement. The first thing I thought of when I saw the reference to the extortion attempt, what happened with Dak Prescott earlier this year. He got a demand letter. That's what the lawyers call the correspondence that goes before the filing of a lawsuit, saying, hey, here's the claims that we have. We're going to pursue them in court unless we settle the case. And instead of negotiating, instead of trying to settle the case, Dak Prescott sued his alleged accuser and her lawyers, arguing extortion and other claims. That's a very aggressive way to go. McManus's lawyer, not quite that aggressive, obviously, but still making the allegation that not only are these claims completely false, fictitious, as the lawyer says, but also it's part of an extortion attempt. That implies to me that this didn't just drop out of the sky on Friday night, that they knew this was coming, because it's really not an extortion attempt to sue someone. The whole idea of the extortion notion is, hey, pay us this money or we're going to take this thing public. When you take it public, when you file the lawsuit, it's not extortion. You're making your claims. You're airing your grievances. You're using the court system as a way to try to rectify something that you believe happened. So it makes me wonder when McManus knew about this. Did he first find out about it on Friday, or had he been approached? The reference to extortion attempt makes me think he possibly was approached at some point before Friday night, which leads to another issue I'll get to in a second. And finally, I asked the NFL Players Association for comment on this because McManus has been a member of the union's executive committee since 2022. They had no comment, but I felt like I just had to ask because he's got a fairly high position within the NFLPA. And this isn't like the normal case where, a player is accused of misconduct, and it's not normal, but there are situations where the player is accused of some sort of misconduct, like a fight with another player, and the NFLPA is in a delicate spot. Here, they have an obligation to defend Brandon McManus, and they surely will if and when the NFL decides to take any action against him. So, with that background, I've identified 5 important issues that we need to keep an eye on moving forward. First of all, and the most obvious, did this happen? The claim again that there was misconduct of some type on the flight. 2 flight attendants, not 1, but 2, making the claim against McManus. Of all the players on the plane, he's the one that was singled out for this claim. It will move forward in civil court. Now, McManus may try at different phases of the case to have the case thrown out, but one of the things that will happen anytime he would make an effort to short-circuit the case before it goes to trial, the standard is you have to assume that the allegations as made are true and accurate. And if the allegations made by these 2 flight attendants are true and accurate, there's enough there for a case to go forward to trial for a jury to decide under the very low standard, preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, did it happen? And if it did, then they get to work on determining what the fair award of damages is. That's how we resolve our disputes in this American justice system. When someone has done something to you that violates your rights, you take them to court, and if you win, they're required to pay you a certain amount of money. That's how that would play out. That's how we'll determine whether or not this happened. The court system will determine, right or wrong, might be imperfect, but the witnesses will testify, the evidence will be presented, and we'll find out whether or not the jury believes that the allegations being made are true and accurate. 2 fronts. 1, did McManus do it? And 2, did the Jaguars fail to properly supervise McManus, and did they fail to properly provide a safe environment on this flight from Jacksonville to London? Second, and I touched on this earlier, is it really extortion? Does it count as extortion to sue someone when you've convinced a lawyer to take on the case, the paperwork is signed, it's submitted, it's supposedly not made up, it's not fabricated? Look, I'm not so naive to think that there haven't been in the history of American jurisprudence some claims that were just made up, but that's not the way it's supposed to go. And there are devices available under the law to try to counter abuses of the system, people making things up, people just trying to get a quick payday and disregarding the truth. That's possible. It's not probable, though. And as I was saying earlier, if a demand letter was sent to Brandon McManus at some point before the case was filed, that's not, people like to call it extortion. It's really not. It's very common. It's incredibly common. One of the first writing projects I remember when I was in law school in 1988, my first year of law school, was to write a demand letter, was to take a claim that someone had that they could file in court. Their rights were violated, they believed. We had to write the letter that would go to the opposing lawyer, laying out the case and making the argument that instead of going to court, you should settle the claim. That is not uncommon. It happens every day. Hundreds of times a day, most likely, from coast to coast. Demand letters are sent. They're not extortion. Now, what complicates this from McManus's perspective is that there are 2. If you've got one person who's cooking up a fictitious claim, as his lawyer says, okay, that's easier, I think, to sell if McManus tells a very compelling story and if the witness's credibility can be challenged through aggressive questioning at deposition or at trial. When you've got 2, unless, and look, it's entirely possible, and that 2 are working in cahoots. But my guess is if you've got something that's been fabricated among 2 different people, you're going to have text messages or some other digital footprints that would show them getting on the same page. One is usually the leader and the other one is the follower. and the leader is holding the follower in place. I've seen that happen before, or at least I've suspected that's been going on. It's just, if it's going to crumble, it's going to completely fall apart. If you've got two people who have fabricated something and have come together, two people together with the same malicious intent, with the same design on lying and cheating and stealing in the system, the lawyers will have an easier job blowing this thing up if it really is two people who come together and do this. And the feedback I've gotten from people around the league who use Atlas, highly professional, very well trained, very good at what they do. And this is a potential mess for Atlas if these two flight attendants are making this claim and it's exposed as a complete and total fabrication, because think twice about using that company if they've got employees who are going to make up claims of things that didn't happen on the plane and then turn around and sue the team, not just the player, but the team that hired the service. Now, look, we're so early into this that there's a lot of dynamics we don't know and may never know, but how on board was Atlas with this? Did they do an investigation? Because, really, that's part of their obligation to provide a safe workplace to their employees. Did they run this up the flagpole internally, and did Atlas give them the okay to go ahead and take this action? Working through the lawyers. But, if something happened that shouldn't have happened on the Atlas flight and Atlas management knows about it, and they say, go ahead and go after our customer and their customer's employee, that's far different from these two individuals just going off on their own and doing it. That's an important dynamic. That's an important factor. Has nothing to do with whether or not it happened, but boy, it has a lot to do with what kind of impact this will or won't have on Atlas's business going forward. Next issue, and this also relates to the question of whether or not McManus received the demand letter. Because if he was put on notice of this at some point in the past, he has an obligation under the personal conduct policy, as I read it, to notify the league, notify his team when you're made aware of something that may be a violation of the personal conduct policy. And obviously, if these allegations are true in the workplace, that kind of behavior, it's a violation of the personal conduct policy. So when that first letter was sent, if a demand letter was sent, if this lawsuit just didn't fall out of the sky, what did McManus do when he found out about it? Did he satisfy his obligation to tell his team or the league? And that leads to, and that can be a separate issue, independent of whether or not he's eventually exonerated in court. Did you comply with the clear mandatory obligation to report this to the league, to the team? That is a violation, even if he's exonerated. And that's important because it leads to the fourth question. Can the Commanders do anything about this? He's got a $1.5 million full guarantee, $6 million, I believe, total salary for 2024. Can they go back and basically annul this contract? And I think if they're inclined to do it, the argument would be, if they can prove this, you knew about it before you signed with us and you didn't disclose it to the league. You didn't fulfill your obligation under the personal conduct policy. And if we had known about this, we wouldn't have signed you. We want our $1.5 million back. We want to void your guarantee. If the money was already paid, we want it back. If we haven't paid it, we want to void the guarantee and not pay you in the future. If they want to be aggressive, if the facts bear that out, it's something they could potentially do. We'll see how that part of it plays out. We don't know right now because we don't know whether or not a demand letter was sent. I have a feeling one was, and then we don't know when it was sent. Was it sent before the decision was made by the Commanders to sign Brandon McManus? All right, last issue. And this is one that we haven't written about yet at PFT, but I think it's the source of the biggest potential problem for the Jaguars. I haven't seen the complaint yet, but when the allegation is made, as it made its way into the reporting on the lawsuit, that it was one big party from Jacksonville to London, was there alcohol on the plane? That's a major issue as it relates to the Jaguars, because the rule has been clear for years now. No alcohol on the plane, no alcohol in the facility, no alcohol being served, players can't bring it on board. And there were 2 incidents that happened in the same month, November of 2022. Remember when the Titans got home from beating the Packers in Lambeau Field on Thursday night, Todd Downing, who was the offensive coordinator at the time, got a DUI. And the timeline made it fairly clear that if he was drinking, it was probably on the plane or at the facility. There wasn't enough time for him to stop off at a bar on the way home after the plane landed, assuming that they were even there at a time when a bar was open, and have enough drinks to get to the level where he would be above the legal limit while he was driving his car. That was a strange one. And then that same month, the Commanders, after upsetting the Eagles on Monday Night Football, flying home, Taylor Heineke with beer on the plane, they got in trouble for that. And there was a memo sent out at the time, and I'm trying to get the memo now, but apparently the memo had some very strong language to all teams about the consequences if there are further violations, up to and including massive fines and the loss of draft picks. So, regardless of whether or not Brandon McManus did anything wrong, regardless of whether or not the Jaguars are responsible for failing to properly supervise him or provide a safe environment on the flight, if they had alcohol on that flight, if it was one big party that wasn't, the equivalent of a first grader's birthday party, if it was an adult party with the beverages that adults typically have at parties, Jaguars got a major problem. Separate from this lawsuit, separate from anything that might happen when it's time to go to court. And that's the league potentially swooping in and imposing significant penalties on the Jaguars, because everybody was warned in November of 2022. Here we are, October of 2023, and that's when this allegedly happened. The Jaguars had better be very concerned about how this might play out once it starts to come out, if it comes out, that there was alcohol being consumed by the players on this flight from Jacksonville to London. So that's where it all stands for now. This is one that I'm going to keep a careful eye on, because it can go a lot of different ways, but it can go in one specific direction where the Jaguars have a major issue with the league under the alcohol policy, where Brandon McManus ultimately is found responsible in civil court for the things he's been accused of doing, where the Jaguars are found responsible and have a massive verdict against them. There's no way to pull this into the secret rigged kangaroo court of arbitration, although they'll try. They'll try to scour over their contracts with Atlas, and they'll try. I'm sure they'll try to come up with an argument, because they always do, that this thing shouldn't go into open court. We don't want anyone to know these facts. We don't want this stuff to get out there. We don't want transparency. They very well may try to do it. But if they don't, at some point a jury in Duval County is going to determine what happened here. And there's a lot of different ways it can go. And the Commanders may have rights. There may have been a violation of the personal conduct policy by failing to disclose this when McManus was first aware of it. So it was kind of a strange little item of news that landed on Memorial Day. It is something that may echo into the coming months and years as this all gets sorted out for a variety of ways. We'll keep on top of it here at PFTPM, PFT Live, profootballtalk.com. Thanks as always for some of your time. Have a great rest of your day. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.